So just for a bit more context, as I said at the start, I'm actually from the Dynamic Dunescapes project. So the Dynamic Dunescapes project is a sand dune restoration project, and I am a people engagement officer that is based in Wales. I oversee engagement and activities for communities around how great sand dunes are as places to be, but also the conservation of sand dunes throughout 12 sites that we're working at in North and South Wales. The slide deck you're about to see was actually produced by Dementia Adventure. They're working with the larger Dunescapes project to look at accessibility of sand dune sites. Dementia Adventure is a small national charity with a mission to enable people living with dementia to get outdoors, connect with nature themselves and their community, and retain a sense of adventure in their own lives. So Dynamic Dunescapes as a project is a 5-partner project. In Wales, we are funded by the Heritage Lottery Fund, and in England, we are funded by the Heritage Lottery Fund and the LIFE programme. We actually pretty much have all 5 partners represented in some way in the room today in terms of organisations. So the partners are Natural England, Plantlife, where myself and Helen are from, the National Trust, NRW, which is Natural Resources Wales, and the Wildlife Trusts. So already from the talks this morning in the workshop sense, that we've been talking about connection to nature. Connection to nature doesn't have to be overcomplicated. It doesn't have to be some expensive day out where we go and do lots of things. Different experiences and different ways of connecting are different for different people. And it's that same message that we've had through all the talks so far, that people experience nature and life differently. It might be simply sitting outdoors is more than enough. When you're thinking about accessibility, though, you're not just thinking about the space that's being provided to sit, you're thinking about the approach, the journey to that space. It might be contact, the opportunities to touch and interact with nature. We're going to hear from Nat in a little while about taking nature to people rather than always bringing people to nature, thinking about the different ways you can approach getting people connected to nature. And it might also be a purposeful activity, something that when people leave, they feel like they've made a contribution. And it's different levels of complexity for each of those things. So in terms of the work in Wales, we've been working in North Wales with Dementia Active, and we undertook a site audit at one of our project sites, which I'll go into in a little while. There was a moment on the site audit that really stuck with me, and it was one of the group from Dementia Active that said, making something accessible for people living with dementia will make it accessible for all. Or in a different way, making somewhere inclusive for all is the best way forward. So it's about enabling different experiences. It's not about what you know about a site, it's about how it makes you feel. And as we've spoken about, that nature can have a massively positive effect on our mental health. So when you think about how can people make a decision of where they might go, what information they might need, well, to start with, they need to be able to access that information. And that might be information about different locations, so they can make a judgment for themselves, or it might be information that you've put together with the help of an organisation if you're labelling yourself as dementia accessible. As we've heard from some of the people in the room, ways that you could do that through getting these labelling from local authorities. This enables people to have a choice and to actually understand what is there at the site they're thinking of going to. So you could think about providing opportunities for self-guided walks by providing maps, just quiet places to sit, but thinking about the full journey of how people get there. So even though the location itself might be accessible, is the car park, is the pathway, is the signage clear? Have information that's designed to engage all senses. And highlight seasonal things to look for. Highlight that dunes, for example, are a great place all year round, as is much of our natural landscape. And that's something that maybe in winter we all go and hide, especially if we're living in Wales. But I don't think we should. And then also ways to get involved. So even though today we're talking about accessibility and dementia, that this actually counts for any engagement that you're considering doing at a site for anyone. So it takes back to that involvement and accessibility for all. I think Linda summarised this really well. One of the things to be very aware of is risk perception. Everyone's appetite for risk is different. Every organisation or person will have its own health and safety policies or way to manage risk. So with that in mind, it's meeting people halfway, but basically providing people with best information for them to be able to make an informed choice. So taking into account and also taking feedback of how a site could be made more accessible will help you find that middle ground that creates an accessible site. And you can do this in collaboration with other organisations, and that's exactly what we've done working around Wales on the dynamic Dunescapes sites. So people often ask, from the work that Dementia Adventure did, looking at what makes a dementia-friendly location, they were mentioning that it's better to say inclusive, because that is an inclusive location is what we're aiming for. So it's talking about inclusivity and access for all. So I want you to sit and think, what makes you feel safe and confident to visit somewhere? What information do you need? What information do you want? How easy is that information to find? It's important to remember that though it's great to have information online, that might not be accessible for everyone. So considering how people get their information, how obvious is the user journey is one thing you might call it. So the information might include stuff before they visit, but also while they're there. Pictures of the area so people can make their own assessments, and phone numbers or emails if they need information. Training for staff to raise awareness or to actually make a site more accessible by, as Sarah mentioned, there is training out there for people to become leaders of walks that have dementia training. Very much this session is about highlighting and raising awareness, and we are looking to connect people. There are other organisations out there that can go into much more detail than we are doing today. Describing the facilities accurately. This might be through a site review or a site audit, and I'll talk about that in just a moment. And doing this in partnership. Particularly if you're like myself, I cover a lot of different bits of engagement across the project that I work on. Accessibility is one part of my work. Therefore, I very much rely on the amazing partnerships, some of which are in the room today, to be able to meet other people that know much more than I do. And by working with partnerships, working with networks, we can reach out into the community, spread the word that a place is accessible. Interestingly, some of the sites where we work in the past haven't been the most accessible. They may have been private land and now they're public, or there's other things that have changed in the local community. So the past perception is that place is somewhere that you don't go. The present perception is still potentially, though it seems a great place to us, that's a place that locals or local communities don't go. So it's about sharing information as well to say, no, come on in, it's welcome. Come and see what we've got to show, come and see this amazing natural space. And word of mouth is a really powerful way to do that. So we keep throwing the word audit, site audit, or kind of review around. And when we did a site audit with Dementia Active, we did use a form that was kind of formatted for more of an indoor building space. But there were certain things that we were looking for. So the process of that site audit, we actually connected with Dementia Active through Linda, through the Enliven project. And we aimed to basically put together a co-design and approach to audit one of the reserves that we work on. I met with Emma and said, this would be amazing if we can do this. And it was a walk. Really what it was is we went out for the morning and we went on a walk. Before we organised the event, some of the site managers I'd spoken to were a little apprehensive about the asks that might come after talking about accessibility, like toilets or paving or tarmac. And actually what was really great that the participants from Dementia Active sat there and said, we're in nature. We know that there isn't always going to be a toilet. We know there isn't always going to be tarmac, but these are the things to make this place more accessible. And this is why we want to come here. So it's kind of, I think, taking that first step and relying on partners and organizations, especially if you're like me, coming from a conservation background that know so much more and can really give you the confidence to audit your site, but learning from the people who know best and the people that experience it, be that people living with dementia themselves or carers that are living with them too. So if we just have a look through this form here, so you could form a focus group or connect with a local organisation, and the things that you might need to consider. Toilets was already mentioned earlier. Is the signage clear? Is those little people on the door just tiny little dots? Do they mean anything to anyone? And this, again, isn't just for people living with dementia. Finding your way. Is the signage clear? This top one here, the end of this path leads to a bird hide. Is it obvious? Is the colours on the map that you're looking at the same as the colours on the signs that are directing people down that path? I recently visited a site where the way markers were a different colour to the map markers. We just ended up going on a nice walk, honestly, because we weren't too sure where we were going. So it's those cues of making those connections that, if they're not clear, can be really complicated if you're trying to navigate a site. Is the information clear? Is there enough information? Is it an accessible location? Are the signs clear? Again, drawing on the experience from our own site audit, we actually have a fence that is a locked gate for cars at the entrance to the site. To the left is a smaller, wheelchair-friendly kissing gate. One of the reflections were that big old gate at the front that's locked makes it look like the site is closed. But a sign that's just saying, over there is another gate, you could pass through that gate and you could get into the site, would already make the site seem more welcoming. Now, when I had a discussion with Catherine about this, and we spoke about those visual cues that we were talking about on that video earlier, it all started to make sense to me when we hadn't really considered that signage before. And steps and pathways. Are the steps even? But if they're not, is there handrails? Which I think everyone can always appreciate a helping hand. There is 2 guides below that are available to help, and post this session we'll be sending around all of these resources. These videos that we're making, I'm actually going to cut them and they will eventually be on our YouTube, but they will also, for the time being, so you guys that have signed up to this session have access to them, be on a Google Drive that I will also send around. So how do you actually go about reaching people and connecting with people? This is why we wanted to bring together such a diverse community into this workshop. On the networking document, we have only asked you to list your organisation, your name, and where you're from. If you're happy, please do add your emails, just in another column. Maybe Helen hops in there and just adds a column for people to pop that in. And that means we're starting that process of networking. We're starting breaking down those barriers, some of that time that is needed to find these organisations in your local area. We're hoping to try and make that a little bit easier. But we don't have all the answers. This is really just to start and us sharing what we've learned from some amazing people we've been working with. Really, it's about linking local. It might be dementia or care support groups, bigger organisations that are working across the UK, or care homes and service providers. And I know Nat said she was going to talk a little bit how she started working with care homes. You might be able to make contact with a group organiser and ask them, offer them, I would like to do a walk. We want to see if the site is accessible and do a site audit. Can you help me with that? I must say, when I said that to Emma, she said, oh, yes. And anyone that's ever met Emma would know exactly the energy she put into that response. You'll be able to work with the site audit and with the group to look at ideas for the site, seek feedback on what's already there, what could make a site more accessible. And you can ask the organizer to guide you and to talk about, you know, what is the best way to engage with different groups that you're wanting to reach. Very much in organising the workshop we've got today, it's been a collaboration with our colleagues, both Linda and Catherine from Bank University and the Enliven project. And without them, there possibly wouldn't be as many people as we have sat in this room today. Think about the talking points. If you're going to run an event, you could run a site audit, or if it's a walk, think about the things where you're going to stop, talk, have seating, have hot drinks, and just break up that experience a little bit and suddenly make it more accessible or more welcoming and more approachable for people that may have not considered going out to a location before if you're running an event. Very much, we are championing co-design. And I've already picked up on a few times that we did this site audit and it was a really fulfilling experience. But just to tease out one more moment that we had during that site audit is the way it worked is that, yep, we set it up with Dementia Active, arrived at site, and we walked through the site. One of the biggest bits of feedback we got was benches. On the site, you get to the bottom of a hill, and it's quite a steep hill. And I sat there and went, oh my gosh, that's a big hill. And the group we were with, one of the women with us was in her 90s, and off she goes. And everyone's going, would you like a car? No, I'm going. And off she goes. And it was wonderful. But the big feedback we got was some benches, even a wooden log that's just been carved slightly, would go a long way on that hill. And that's probably for quite a lot of people, those benches would go a long way. And then we said to Dementia Active at the end, well, could we actually have a headed letter, just so that was going to be shared by the site lead to their management team to formalise the process. And they were happy to oblige, which we thank them very much for. And I know that was really, really useful insight and information for the site manager we were working with that day. And we are looking to go out and do a June-based session with them. And it gave me a lot to think about and was really eye-opening going through the opportunity that we put together with the group. This isn't a one-size-fits-all. It really isn't. But starting to think about accessibility for an event or a location is the first step to making an area much more inclusive. And we'll be sharing all these resources, including some listed on this slide, post-event. But I think, yeah, if there's anything you take away, I think we've all said about 5 times, it really isn't one size fits all. So there will be adaptations that need to be made. But we hope that you are enjoying and learning quite a lot. I can see there's all sorts in the chat. So I'm going to stop sharing